You wake up one morning and the world feels slightly off balance, as if the ground beneath your feet has shifted without warning. Maybe it was the email that arrived at 6:47 a.m., the one that ended a project you had nurtured for months. Or perhaps it was the quiet conversation over coffee, where someone you trusted looked away and said the words you had been dreading. It could even be something quieter, more insidious, like the slow realization that another year has passed, and the life you imagined still feels just out of reach. In that moment, a familiar tightness settles in your chest, not sharp like physical pain, but deeper, more personal. The kind that makes your thoughts scatter and your breathing shallow. You tell yourself it is nothing, just another bump in the road. Yet the voice in your head keeps whispering the same question over and over. Why does this keep happening to me? Why, when I have worked so hard, planned so carefully, hoped so fiercely, do things refuse to line up the way they should? This feeling is not rare. It is not a sign of weakness or failure or some personal flaw that sets you apart from everyone else. It is the universal human experience of watching your carefully constructed plans unravel, and in that unraveling, something ancient inside you stirs. Neuroscience tells us that our brains are wired to treat uncertainty as a threat, lighting up the same neural pathways that once kept our ancestors alive on the savannah. When things do not go your way, your mind does not simply register disappointment. It floods your body with a cocktail of stress hormones, preparing you for fight or flight, even though the danger is invisible and internal. You feel it in the pit of your stomach, the racing pulse, the sudden urge to fix it or flee from it or numb it away. And right there, in that physiological storm, you begin to wonder if maybe you are the problem. Maybe if you had been smarter, braver, more disciplined, more anything, this would not have happened. But here is the quiet truth that few dare to speak aloud. This ache you feel is not proof that you are broken. It is proof that you are alive and reaching for something more. The very fact that you are listening to these words right now means you have refused to settle completely. You have dreams that refuse to die quietly. You have ambitions that keep knocking on the door of your daily life, even when the world keeps slamming it shut. And yet every time you reach, something pushes back. A door closes. A relationship fades. An opportunity evaporates. The pattern repeats until it starts to feel personal, like the universe itself has singled you out for a special kind of disappointment. You start scanning your past for the mistake that caused it all, replaying conversations, second-guessing decisions, wondering if the version of you that existed 5 years ago made one wrong turn that doomed everything that followed. The truth is that your brain was never designed for the life you are trying to build. It was designed for survival, not for extraordinary achievement, not for creative fulfillment, not for the kind of deep, meaningful success that leaves you feeling proud at the end of your days. It was designed to keep you breathing, fed, and socially accepted long enough to pass on your genes. Everything else, the dreams, the ambitions, the quiet longing for a life that feels like it belongs to you. Those are beautiful luxuries that your nervous system views as secondary at best and dangerous distractions at worst. Take the story of Michael Hargrove, a 38-year-old software architect living in a quiet suburb outside Portland. Michael had spent 12 years building a solid career at a respected tech firm. He was good at his job, respected by his colleagues, and paid well enough to afford the house with the backyard where his 2 daughters could play. On paper, everything looked stable. But deep down, Michael carried a dream he had never spoken aloud to anyone. He wanted to build something of his own, a platform that would help small businesses manage their finances without the complexity of traditional accounting software. He had sketched the idea late at night for years, refining the user interface in his mind while driving to work, imagining the moment when a real user would tell him how much time his creation had saved them. One spring morning, his boss called him into a meeting and casually mentioned that the company was looking for internal ideas to fund as side projects. This was it, Michael thought. His chance. He prepared for weeks, staying up late to polish his pitch deck, practicing in front of the mirror until the words felt natural. The night before the presentation, he lay awake staring at the ceiling, heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and terror. The next morning, as he stood in front of the small group of executives, the familiar voice in his head began its work. What if they laughed? What if this idea was not as good as he thought? What if leaving the safety of his current role meant he could not provide for his family the way he always had? His voice faltered midway through the second slide. He saw one executive glance at her phone. Another shifted uncomfortably in his chair. By the time Michael finished, the room was polite but distant. They thanked him for his time and promised to circle back. They never did. Michael drove home that evening, feeling the weight of failure settle into his bones. He told himself it was for the best. The timing was not right. The company was not ready for innovation. He had responsibilities. Over the next months, he watched as a younger colleague pitched a similar but less refined idea and received modest funding to explore it further. The colleague was not smarter or more talented than Michael. He simply had not listened as closely to the voice of survival. Michael had. And in choosing safety, he had quietly sentenced his dream to a slow death in the back of his mind. Years later, he would still feel a pang every time he opened his laptop and saw the folder labeled simply idea. It was not regret over the lost opportunity so much as the slow realization that his brain had done exactly what it was designed to do. It had kept him safe, and in doing so, it had kept him small. But understanding the brain's preference for survival is only the beginning. The real pain of setbacks comes from something even more primal. The way rejection and failure do not just disappoint us. They wound us at the level of our nervous system in ways that feel indistinguishable from physical harm. When things do not go your way, especially when that setback involves another person saying no or walking away or choosing someone else, your brain does not process it as a simple social transaction. It treats it as a threat to your very survival. Decades of neuroimaging research have shown that the same regions of the brain that register physical pain, the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and the insula, light up with equal intensity when we experience social rejection. In other words, your brain literally hurts when you are excluded, criticized, or left behind. This is not metaphorical. It is physiological. Evolution wired us this way because, for most of human history, being cast out of the tribe meant certain death, alone, without the protection and resources of the group. Our ancestors did not survive, so your nervous system still treats every missed promotion, every quiet ghosting as a form of social exile. It floods you with the same stress response it would trigger if you were facing a predator. Consider the experience of Emily Thompson, a 34-year-old marketing director in Chicago who had spent 6 years climbing the ladder at a mid-sized advertising agency. Emily was the kind of person who arrived early, stayed late, and remembered the small details that made clients feel seen. When a senior creative director position opened up, she was certain it was hers. She had the track record, the relationships, the quiet endorsements from clients who specifically asked for her by name. The interview process felt warm and familiar until the final round, when the CEO, a man she had always respected, leaned back in his chair and said gently, "We've decided to go in a different direction." The words landed like a physical blow. Emily smiled, thanked him for the opportunity, and walked out of the building with her head high. But the moment she reached her car, the tears came hot and uncontrollable. She sat there in the parking garage for nearly an hour, replaying every moment of the interview, searching for the exact sentence where she had lost it. That night, she canceled plans with friends and lay awake wondering what was wrong with her. Was she too quiet in meetings? Too ambitious? Not ambitious enough? The rejection did not just sting her ego. It triggered a deep, ancient panic that made her question her value as a human being. Her brain interpreted the decision as social expulsion. even though she still had her job and her colleagues still liked her. The pain was so intense that she began avoiding the creative team altogether, choosing to eat lunch at her desk rather than risk the casual conversations that might remind her of what she had lost. Months later, when a different opportunity finally came along at a competing agency, Emily almost turned it down. The fear of being rejected again had become larger than the desire to grow. She had internalized the message her nervous system had screamed at her. Stay where you are known. Stay where you are safe. Do not risk the pain of being seen and found wanting. It took a long conversation with a mentor who understood the neuroscience behind her reaction to help Emily see that the pain was not evidence she was unworthy. It was evidence that her brain was protecting her the only way it knew how. Once she understood that, she could begin to separate the biological alarm from the actual truth of her capabilities. She took the new job, and in doing so, she started teaching her nervous system a new lesson, that rejection, while painful, was not fatal. This brings us to the quiet trap that keeps so many capable people stuck exactly where they are, the comfort zone. On the surface, the comfort zone feels like a kind of mercy. It is the warm bath of routine, the familiar faces at work, the predictable rhythm of days that do not ask too much of you. It promises relief from the constant cortisol spikes of uncertainty, and for a while it delivers. You sleep better. Your relationships feel stable. The weekends stretch out in pleasant repetition. But beneath that surface comfort lies a slow, almost imperceptible erosion of your potential. Every day you choose the known over the possible. You are trading long-term vitality for short-term peace. And your brain, ever the efficient accountant, keeps careful track of the exchange. David Whitaker was 42 when he first noticed the trap closing around him. He had been married for 14 years to a woman he still cared for, but no longer felt truly alive with. Their conversations had settled into the familiar rhythm of logistics. Who was picking up the kids? What needed fixing around the house? Whether they should visit her parents for the holiday. The spark that had once made David feel electric in her presence had dimmed to a low, steady glow. He told himself this was normal. All marriages changed. He had responsibilities. The children were thriving. Leaving would be selfish. So he stayed. He stayed through the quiet dinners where neither of them could think of anything meaningful to say. He stayed through the nights when he lay beside her, feeling more alone than if he had been in an empty room. He stayed because the discomfort of staying was familiar, while the discomfort of leaving was unknown and therefore terrifying. One autumn evening, after putting the children to bed, David sat on the back porch with a glass of whiskey and allowed himself to imagine what his life might look like if he finally chose something different. The vision was so vivid and so full of possibility that tears came to his eyes. But the moment he stood up to go inside, the old familiar voice returned. What if the kids suffered? What if he regretted it? What if the new life turned out to be worse than the one he already knew? He poured the rest of the whiskey down the sink and went to bed. Years later, when the marriage finally ended, not because he chose to leave, but because his wife met someone who made her feel seen again, David realized the true cost of his comfort. It was not the divorce itself. It was the decade he had spent slowly disappearing inside a life that no longer fit him. The comfort zone had not protected him. It had simply delayed the inevitable reckoning. Sarah Brennan had always been the careful one. Growing up in a small town in Vermont, she watched her father lose everything in a business venture that seemed too good to be true. The lesson stayed with her. Safety first. Plan everything. Never bet more than you can afford to lose. By the time she was 30, she had a stable job as an accountant, a modest savings account, and a carefully maintained circle of friends who shared her preference for quiet evenings and predictable weekends. When a former colleague reached out about joining a startup that was developing sustainable packaging materials, Sarah felt a flicker of genuine excitement. The role would require her to move across the country, learn an entirely new industry, and accept a significant pay cut for the first year. On paper, it looked reckless. She declined. 5 years later, that same startup was acquired by a major corporation for 9 figures. The colleague who had invited her became a multimillionaire before she turned 40. Sarah read about it in the local business news while sitting at her desk in the same accounting firm where she had started. The promotion she had been waiting for had finally come, but it felt hollow. She had more security than ever before, yet something essential was missing. In quiet moments, she would catch herself wondering what her life might have looked like if she had said yes. The safe choice had not spared her from disappointment. It had simply traded the sharp pain of possible failure for the dull, chronic pain of unrealized potential. She had avoided the risk of falling, only to discover that standing perfectly still could be its own kind of falling. James Caldwell was 51 when he finally saw the prison for what it was. A high school history teacher in a suburb of Boston, James had spent 27 years teaching the same curriculum, coaching the same sports, living in the same modest house with the same carefully tended garden. He told himself he was content. The students liked him. His colleagues respected him. His wife, who had passed away 5 years earlier, had always said he was the steady one, the rock. But in the quiet hours after the school day ended, James would sit on his back deck and feel an emptiness that no amount of routine could fill. He had dreams once, of writing a book about the forgotten women of the American Revolution, of traveling to the places he taught about, of maybe even teaching overseas for a year. Those dreams had been gently set aside each time a new responsibility appeared. A mortgage, a child's college tuition, the comfort of knowing exactly what tomorrow would bring. The turning point came on an ordinary Tuesday when one of his students, a quiet girl named Maya, stayed after class to thank him for a lesson that had inspired her to apply for a scholarship abroad. As she spoke, her eyes bright with possibility, James felt something crack open inside his chest. He realized with sudden painful clarity that he had spent decades teaching young people to reach for the world while he himself had chosen the smallest possible version of his own life. That night he opened his laptop and began writing the first chapter of the book he had carried in his heart for 30 years. The words came slowly at first, hesitant, as if his fingers had forgotten how to take risks. But they came, and with them came the understanding that fear had not kept him safe. It had kept him imprisoned in a life that was only half his. These stories are not meant to shame you or make you feel that you have already waited too long. They are meant to illuminate the invisible architecture that has been shaping your choices without your full awareness. Because once you see the prison, you can begin to dismantle it. Once you understand that your brain's fierce devotion to survival is not your enemy but a misguided ally, you can start negotiating with it instead of fighting it. The path forward is not about becoming fearless. Fear will always be there doing its ancient job. The path forward is about learning to move forward while the fear is still speaking. It is about recognizing that the discomfort you feel when things do not go your way is not a stop sign but a signal that you are standing at the threshold of something that matters. And as you begin to see these patterns more clearly in your own life, something remarkable starts to happen. The very setbacks that once felt like evidence of your inadequacy become the raw material for a different kind of strength. The rejections that once sent you spiraling become the data points that teach you where your true path lies. The comfort zone that once felt like home begins to feel more like a beautiful cage you are ready to leave. This is not the end of the story. It is only the beginning of understanding why things so often refuse to go your way, and what you can do when they do not. There is a way through this, a way that honors both the ancient wisdom of your nervous system and the deeper longing of your spirit. And that way begins exactly where you are sitting right now, listening, breathing, and daring to imagine that maybe, just maybe, the next chapter of your life is not determined by what has already happened, but by how you choose to respond to what happens next. And in that moment of choosing how to respond, something begins to shift inside you. You start to see that not every closed door is a loss. Some doors close because they were never meant to lead to the future you are destined for. They disappear from your path not as punishment, but as protection, guiding you away from paths that would have led to dead ends or distractions that would have kept you from your true purpose. This perspective changes everything because it invites you to stop fighting against what has already happened and instead begin asking a different question. What if this closed door is actually clearing space for something far better than you could have planned? What if the rejection or the missed opportunity is not evidence that you are unworthy, but a quiet redirection toward the life that truly fits who you are becoming? When you start viewing setbacks through this lens, the emotional weight begins to lift. The sting softens. You realize that the universe, or life, or whatever force you believe guides your journey, is not against you. It is working on your behalf in ways your limited perspective cannot yet see. This understanding matters deeply because it frees you from the exhausting cycle of regret and self-blame. It allows you to release the grip on what did not work out and turn your energy toward what might unfold next. Consider the story of Robert Langford, a 43-year-old architect living in a bustling neighborhood of Seattle. Robert had poured his heart and soul into designing a luxury waterfront complex that he believed would define his career. For 18 months, he worked late nights refining every detail, meeting with investors and imagining the day when the city would walk through the completed buildings and marvel at his vision. The project felt like the culmination of everything he had trained for. Then, without warning, the lead investor pulled out, citing shifting market conditions. The entire project collapsed overnight. Robert sat in his studio, surrounded by blueprints and models, feeling as though his entire professional identity had been stripped away. He questioned every choice that had led him there. He wondered if he had misread the signs or if he simply was not talented enough to make big ideas reality. For weeks, he barely left his apartment, replaying the meetings in his mind, searching for the moment when it all went wrong. Yet in the quiet aftermath, something unexpected began to emerge. With the project gone, Robert found himself with time he had not had in years. He started sketching smaller, more intimate designs for community spaces in underserved neighborhoods. One afternoon, while walking through a local park, he noticed how families gathered under simple shelters and how children played in open areas that felt alive with possibility. Inspired, he began volunteering his skills to redesign a neglected community center. The work was unpaid at first and far removed from the prestige he had chased, but it reignited a passion he had forgotten. Word of his innovative yet practical approach spread, and soon a nonprofit organization approached him to lead a citywide initiative on affordable housing design. The scale was different from his original dream, but the impact was immediate and deeply fulfilling. Years later, Robert would stand in one of the completed centers, watching children laugh and families connect, and realize that the closed door on that luxury project had not ended his career. It had redirected him toward work that aligned with his deeper values. The loss had not diminished him. It had revealed a path he never would have discovered if everything had gone according to his original plan. Now that you can see how some closed doors serve as gentle redirections, it becomes easier to consider a related truth that can feel even more uncomfortable at first. Life does not always give people what they want. Sometimes life removes things that prevent growth, even when those things feel essential to your happiness. This removal can come in the form of a relationship ending, or a job disappearing, or a health challenge arising at the worst possible moment. In those times, it is natural to feel abandoned or punished. Your mind races to understand why something good was taken away. Yet from the perspective of psychology and emotional development, these removals often act as necessary pruning. They clear away what no longer serves your evolution, even if your conscious mind cannot yet appreciate the wisdom behind it. The pain you feel in these moments is real and valid, but it also carries an invitation to look deeper. What if the thing that was removed was actually holding you back from becoming the person you are meant to be? What if its absence is creating the exact conditions needed for new strengths to emerge? Exploring this idea matters because it transforms passive suffering into active curiosity. It helps you move from asking, "Why me?" to asking, "What now?" And in that shift, you reclaim your power. Let us look at the experience of Olivia Kensington, a 39-year-old teacher from a small coastal town in Maine. Olivia had built her entire sense of identity around her marriage and her role as a devoted wife and mother. For 15 years, she supported her husband through his demanding career in finance while raising their 2 sons and maintaining a home that felt like a sanctuary. She told herself that this was enough, that her happiness came from seeing her family thrive. Then one ordinary Tuesday, her husband sat her down and explained that he had fallen in love with someone else. The words landed like a physical blow. In the weeks that followed, Olivia moved through her days in a fog of grief and disbelief. She questioned everything about herself, wondering if she had been too available or not exciting enough or simply invisible in her own life. The home she had loved now felt like a reminder of what she had lost. The routines that once brought comfort now echoed with emptiness. During the darkest months, Olivia began journaling late at night when sleep would not come. At first, the pages were filled with anger and sorrow, but gradually something else appeared. She started writing about dreams she had set aside when she got married. Dreams of traveling alone and studying art history and perhaps even writing a book about the stories of ordinary women who rebuilt their lives. With the marriage gone, she found herself with space she had never known. She enrolled in an online course on Renaissance art and soon discovered a talent for connecting historical narratives with modern emotions. Her sons watched in quiet amazement as their mother began to light up in ways they had never seen. One summer, she took her first solo trip to Italy, where she wandered through museums and felt a profound sense of coming home to herself. The pain of the divorce did not vanish, but it transformed into fuel for growth. Years later, Olivia would look back and realize that life had not taken her marriage to punish her. It had removed it because staying in that relationship would have kept her small. The removal created the emptiness she needed to fill with her own becoming. She was not broken by the loss. She was being reshaped by it into a version of herself that felt truly alive. Building on this understanding of how life sometimes removes what we cling to, we can now turn our attention to the idea of delayed success and why some failures later become the foundation for achievements we could never have imagined in the moment. Timing plays a mysterious role in human lives. What feels like a devastating setback today may prove to be the exact preparation needed for a breakthrough tomorrow. Patience is not passive waiting. It is active trust that the pieces are aligning even when you cannot see the full picture. Resilience grows strongest not in the absence of failure, but through repeated encounters with it. Perspective shifts when you realize that success is rarely linear. It often requires detours that teach skills and build character in ways straight paths never could. This concept matters because it offers hope when everything feels stalled. It reminds you that the delay is not denial, it is preparation. When you embrace this truth, you stop measuring your worth by how quickly things happen and start appreciating the depth that comes from waiting well. The story of Thomas Whitaker illustrates this beautifully. Thomas was a 47-year-old engineer living in Denver who had spent a decade developing a prototype for a solar-powered water purification system designed for remote communities. He believed the invention could change lives, and he poured every savings into patenting and testing it. After 3 years of presentations to investors and government agencies, he faced repeated rejections. The technology was promising, but the market was not ready, the feedback said. Funding dried up. His marriage strained under the financial pressure and eventually ended. Thomas felt like a failure at the deepest level. He took a mundane job repairing machinery just to cover bills and watched as younger colleagues launched similar but less refined products that somehow gained traction. The delay felt personal and cruel. In the years that followed, Thomas did not abandon his idea, but he let it rest while he focused on mastering the practical side of engineering in harsh environments. He traveled for work to rural areas, learning about real-world challenges that no laboratory could simulate. Slowly he refined his original design, incorporating lessons from those experiences. One afternoon, a former colleague reached out about a humanitarian crisis in a drought-stricken region of Africa. They needed a solution that was durable, affordable, and easy to maintain. Thomas realized his years of delay had equipped him with exactly the knowledge required. He submitted his updated prototype and it was selected. Within 18 months, his system was being installed in villages across 3 continents. The success, when it finally arrived, felt sweeter because of the long road that led there. Thomas later told friends that the early failures had not delayed his success. They had ensured it. Without those years of apparent stagnation, he would have launched a product that was not yet ready for the real world. The delay had been the making of him. With this foundation of delayed success in place, we can now explore the lessons hidden inside disappointment and how setbacks often carry valuable information that can transform your entire approach to life. Disappointment is rarely just an emotion to endure. It is a teacher dressed in uncomfortable clothing. It reveals blind spots in your thinking. It highlights areas where your expectations were misaligned with reality. It invites greater emotional intelligence by forcing you to sit with feelings you would rather avoid. Through disappointment, you learn self-awareness at a level that success alone rarely provides. You discover what truly matters to you once the superficial goals fall away. You develop empathy for others who struggle because you have walked the same path. These lessons matter because they turn pain into wisdom. They prevent you from repeating the same patterns that led to the setback in the first place. When you extract the information hidden inside disappointment, you stop seeing it as a dead end and start treating it as a crossroads rich with possibility. Take the journey of Sophia Laurent, a 36-year-old graphic designer from Toronto, who had always prided herself on her ability to read people and deliver exactly what clients wanted. When a major advertising campaign she led received harsh feedback from the client, she was devastated. The comments felt personal, attacking her creativity and vision. For days, she replayed the meeting, wondering if she had lost her touch. Instead of quitting, she forced herself to examine the disappointment more closely. She asked for specific examples and listened without defensiveness. What emerged was surprising. The client did not want flashy designs. They wanted authenticity and emotional connection. Sophia realized she had been relying on trends rather than digging into the deeper story of the brand. This insight led her to completely revamp her process. She began spending more time listening to client stories before touching a sketch pad. Her next project not only won awards, but sparked a new reputation for work that resonated on a human level. The original disappointment had not been a sign that she was inadequate. It had been data pointing her toward a more meaningful way of working. Sophia grew not despite the setback, but because of what it revealed about her own habits and assumptions. Finally, we arrive at the comeback mindset, the powerful truth that successful people are not those who avoid failure. They become successful precisely because of how they respond after failure. This mindset is built on the understanding that resilience is a skill you can cultivate rather than a trait you either have or do not have. It involves choosing to see failure as feedback instead of finality. It means reframing the narrative from "I am not good enough" to "I am learning what works." Psychologically, this shift activates different parts of your brain, moving you from threat response to problem-solving mode. It builds neural pathways for persistence and creativity. The comeback mindset matters because it turns every setback into a stepping stone. It separates those who eventually succeed from those who remain stuck. When you adopt it, you stop fearing failure and start using it as raw material for your greatest achievements. The story of Marcus Hale, a 52-year-old restaurateur from Melbourne, captures this perfectly. Marcus had opened his first restaurant with high hopes, only to watch it fail within 2 years due to poor location and economic downturn. The closure left him bankrupt and embarrassed. Friends suggested he find a stable job, but Marcus refused to let the failure define him. He took a position as a line cook in a busy downtown eatery to learn the business from the ground up. He observed what made certain nights successful and what caused others to flop. He saved every tip and studied financial management in his spare time. 3 years later, when a prime location became available, he was ready. His new restaurant incorporated every lesson from the first failure, from menu design to customer service to cash flow management. It thrived, becoming a neighborhood institution known for its warm atmosphere and innovative yet approachable cuisine. Marcus often said the first restaurant taught him how to fail. The second one taught him how to succeed. His comeback was not luck. It was the deliberate choice to respond to failure with curiosity, humility, and relentless action. As we reach the end of this journey together, I want you to know how grateful I am that you have spent this time with these words. You have shown courage simply by showing up and listening with an open heart. The lessons we have explored are not abstract ideas. They are practical tools you can begin using today in your own life. When things do not go your way, remember that your brain is wired for survival, but you are wired for so much more. Choose to see closed doors as redirections. Trust that removals create space for growth. Embrace delays as preparation. Mind disappointments for their hidden wisdom. And above all, cultivate that comeback mindset that turns every fall into a launch pad. Apply these insights one small step at a time, and watch how your relationship with setbacks begins to transform. Thank you for trusting this audiobook with your time and your hopes. If these words have moved you or helped you see your challenges in a new light, please support the channel that brought them to you. Like this video so others can discover it too. Subscribe so you never miss the next life-changing book we share. And come back soon for another audiobook. It just might change everything for you once again. Until then, keep listening to that quiet voice inside that refuses to give up. Your story is still unfolding, and the best chapters are yet to come.